Hello and welcome to another Q&A live. My name is Shakina and I work in the OET education team. I'm going to be on hand for the next hour to answer all of your questions live here. I have no idea of the questions that you're going to ask, but I'm just going to work my way through choosing the questions as I go along. What if you're new to this? If you're new to the session and have never attended before, the format is really quite simple. If you've got any questions about OET, post them in the chat of the platform that you are watching from, whether that's Facebook or YouTube. Post your question in the chat there. That will come through to me here, and I will work my way through your questions in the next 60 minutes. There are no silly questions. There's no question. If you feel like you have something you want to ask, please do post it in the chat. You could be new to OET, starting out your journey, your preparation journey, or maybe you've got a test coming up very soon. It doesn't matter where you are in your OET journey. Any question, like I said, there's no silly questions. Just post them in the chat. So I can see there's already quite a few coming through, and a lot of you saying hello there in the chat. So hello to all of you, and also if you're watching the recording later. I've got like I said already, got a few questions here. So I'm going to start and dive right into it. I'm just going to take off that. Lovely. So I've got a question from Haroon. Haroon joins us on YouTube, and Haroon's asking how to get maximum marks in reading part C. So I've got a few tips actually, which I'm going to pull up here on the screen, and I'll just talk a little bit about them, and hopefully they should be helpful. So the important thing with reading part C is really, the first thing is perhaps to manage your time. Now, reading part C and part B are together. You have 45 minutes to do both of those parts. So you should really aim to finish your reading part B in about 10 to 12 minutes, and then that will give you about 35 minutes for both your reading part C's. It's also good to equally kind of divide your time between the two part C's, and so try and spend roughly about 15 to 17 minutes on each part C. So once you've got that figured out, you should be able to manage your time better. You should also feel more confident that you're in control of your reading at that time. So that's more sort of the strategy aspect of the time. Moving on to my next step, which is to find evidence for all the options. So it's really important that you don't simply just match options or words in options to the words that you see in the text. So all of the options could be mentioned in the text, but you need to find the one that answers the question, the option that answers the question. And to do that, you need to read the text to find why you think the answer that you've chosen is correct. So find evidence for that. And it's also a good idea to find evidence for why the other options are not correct. So doing both will help you feel confident of your answer. And it will also help you to kind of not be fooled or not fall into the trap of the distractors that are the other incorrect answer options. A really good way to kind of engage with the text. So it's really important that, like I said, you don't match words or phrases in the answer options with words or phrases that you see in the text. So, a really good way to focus your energies on the text only is to read the question, understand the question, and then go to the text. Don't look at the answer options. Go to the text and try answering the question in your own words. And once you've done that, you'll really sort of be able to grasp the meaning of the text, and then go back to the answer options, and then you should find that it'll be easier to choose the correct answer options because you've got a good grasp on the meaning of the text. This might be a strategy that might take a few times of practice for you to get right, but it's definitely one worth trying, one worth seeing how you go with. Um, right. Let's come back. Great. So lots of questions coming in. Thank you, everyone, for your questions. All right. Um, I've got a question here from one of our viewers on YouTube. Um, I'm not sure what your name is. I can't read Arabic, but I think that question about listening is one that is quite common about spelling. And what I will perhaps recommend is our listening week videos that we put out just before the break, before the holiday season in December. And listening week, we do talk a lot about spelling in one of the videos that my colleague Rebecca's done. And I think that would be a useful resource uh, to watch after you've watched this. But what I will say is that spelling mistakes are an area where candidates often waste marks because it might be a really simple word to spell, but because they're in a hurry or they're not listening for those finer details of the S, for example, as you said, that could be a reason why you lose marks. So there are sometimes words where, yes, using the S is important because that is the word. So it's important to and it makes a difference to the information that you record. So it's important to, for example, if I could just think of an example, eye and eyes. You have pain in one eye, but you have pain in both eyes. That's different. So it does affect the accuracy of what you're recording, and therefore that would be marked incorrect. So it's a good observation that you've made, sort of reflected that you make mistakes with spelling. That's a really good sort of awareness to have. And I think what I'm going to do is just post in the chat now the sort of the video to our listening week. As I said, the listening week playlist, which I think um, will help a lot with that. So if you can just give me a moment to do that. Right. Um, all right. So what I'll do is I'll just keep going, and I'll just post that in the chat as we go along. Coming back to that. Um, All right, I've got a question here from Keta. Keta joins us on YouTube, and Keta's asking, can we strike through or cross out in the writing section? So that's absolutely fine. You can change your answer. You can strike through, cross out a word that you've spelled wrongly, for example, or a word, replace it with a different word. You can absolutely do that. One word of caution, though, is to make sure that you do it clearly and legibly so that the new word that you write is clear to the assessors. They can see it and there is no sort of confusion about what you've written. Um, I've got some questions about reading, and so I'm just going to pick up one question here from Nitika Sharma, and she's asking how to some advice on reading generally. It's something that is she says she's not able to clear. So with reading, if you find that you have you've tried and there might be some problems that you're always hitting against a wall, if I could use that phrase. It's actually a really good idea to think about reading, improving your reading skills. Now that's a little bit different from practicing tests. When you do a practice test, you, you're actually not learning the skills that you need to do that practice test. You are just doing the test. So if you think about it like you would think about a driving test, for example, when you go to get your license and there's a police officer examining you, um, that is your test. But doing that test over and over again is not going to really improve your driving skills, is it? You need to learn the basics. So you need to learn how to change gears, for example, turn the wheel, and so on. And so it's very much the same concept when you come to reading. You need to think about the skills that you need to improve, so that when you go and do the practice tests, you can actually see the improvement that you've made. And so what again I'm going to do is actually just post in the chat right now our reading week playlist. Now the reading week was something that we did earlier in 2023, and this playlist actually gives you talks about those skills um, that I've that I referred to, but really breaks down all of the skills that you need for each part of the test. So I'm just going to post that in the chat. I'd encourage you to watch the recordings, and all of the recordings refer to sample test 5. So go watch that and look at the different skills that you need. There's also plenty more videos on each of those kinds of skills that are there on our YouTube channel, on our playlist, on our reading playlist. And so I'd encourage you to watch the reading week, get to know what skills you need to improve, and then go and look at further ways to improve those skills in our playlists. All right. Um, all right. So um, I have got a question from Dr. Sajad Ahmed on YouTube, and Dr. Sajad's asking about I think this is related to single test retakes, single subtest retakes. So the option to take a single test is available with OAT. You can book a single subtest. What I'd like to say here is that it's actually a requirement that you need to check with the regulator. So it is not OET that decides if single subtests are accepted or two subtests are accepted. It is the regulator that you want to work with, who controls the decisions around what scores they will accept. Some regulators accept single subtest retakes and those scores, while other regulators and most regulators expect a full sitting of the full sitting as valid. right. Um, okay, I've seen some more great questions. And a question on reading, reading part A, which I'm going to pop up here again, and perhaps again share some tips with you on how to best approach the questions in reading part A. So what I'm going to do is just take off your comment so we can see the tips. Charles there on YouTube asking um, how can I be effective in reading part A? Okay, so reading part A, there is the pressure of time, but it's important to know, and I can reassure you that if you go through the questions in order and apply the right skills, you will be able to finish all of the 20 questions in 15 minutes. And why it's important to go through the questions in order is because the test is designed to make it easy for you to find the answers when you go through them in order. And what am I talking about? The first set of questions, which is your matching questions, you can actually do quite quickly just by reading the headings, subheadings, looking at the table columns, looking at the different text features, as you can see in the second tip, the different text features to quickly find answers. You don't need to read each text in order. You don't need to read each line. You don't need to read each word. You just need to look at the features that are there in the text that are popping out that your eyes can catch. That will give you a quick idea of what they're about. And those are the kinds of questions you'll find in the matching set. So once you've got that global view, so you know roughly what all the texts are about, um, you know the topics, you know what kinds of texts, is it a dosage chart or is it a treatment pathway, then when you move to the next questions, you'll be able to know where to find the answer. The third tip is to check that your spelling is accurate. Now, remember in reading part A, you need to find the answer and pick the answer from the text and write it exactly as it is without changing anything into that blank. Now, it's important that you spend a few extra seconds to just check that your spelling is correct, because that can often, like I said, with listening again, you waste marks because you haven't checked that the spelling is correct. So and then the last tip, as I said before about the timing, there is a lot of pressure. And it is perhaps easy for me to say not to panic, but it is quite possible. And one way that you can actually reduce the stress and the panic around reading part A is actually to not have a time limit when you first practice. So remove the time limit, just finish the questions, complete the questions, see how long it takes you, and then slowly reduce the time. So let's say, for example, you took 25 minutes to answer the 20 questions. You know, the next time you try another test, bring it down by 2 or 3 minutes. And that will really help you to get comfortable practicing the skills that you need to apply. And it'll also help you get comfortable with that time limit, because you've done it slowly and not under too much stress. All right. So I'm just going to keep going. All right. So I'm going to pull up a question here. From Merin, and Merin joins on us on YouTube. Now, Merin's asking, there's a discharge letter to the patient's own doctor, a GP, and the task or discharge plan doesn't mention any specific tasks. like management monitoring. So, therefore, what should be included in the intro? Is it only that the patient is being discharged today? So, Merin, I would like, so just looking at what you've described, I can tell you that an OET task, an official OET task, is going to have a clear purpose for the letter. So, there's going to be a clear reason why you, as the healthcare professional, need to write that letter to the patient's GP. And the purpose for writing is going to be made very clear, like you've said, in the task, or in, the discharge plan, in the notes at towards the end of the case notes. So if it's not there, and you can't see a clear reason for writing that letter, then it's perhaps true that you're maybe using an unofficial set of case notes that have been downloaded from social media, maybe, that a friend has passed on to you. It could very well have the OET logo, because that's often what we find, is that a lot of these unofficial case notes do have, the OET logo. That's because that's been taken and put on there, but they are unofficial tasks. And the one way to know that is, as you've correctly identified, is that there is no clear purpose for writing, and it's not anywhere in the discharge plan. It's not in the case notes or in the writing task. All right. I've got a question here from Shiny, who joins us on Facebook. And Shiny is asking, can we underline main points on questions and options in listening parts B and C? I think, Shiny, you're talking about the paper-based test, and you definitely can, make notes or underline words in both the options and in the questions themselves. For parts B and C, what perhaps a little word of caution is that when you do make marks, make sure that you leave enough space, or you leave the area around the lozenge that you have to shade in clear, so that the computer is able to read clearly the option that you've shaded in. There should not be any conflicting kind of marks around the options, that the computer would not be able to read properly. All right. I've got a question here on speaking from May, and May joins us on Facebook. May is asking about improving speaking, um, some tips for improving speaking. May, I think the first tip that I would give is that you should try and speak more English every single day. Now, that could be quite obvious, but it's really something that often, when we find that candidates often struggle with doing, because perhaps there's no opportunity to practice speaking in English in the country that they're in, um, or that they have very little time to practice. So it's important to dedicate time every day and buddy up with someone, maybe someone else studying for OET, or a friend, a family member with whom you can practice speaking English every single day. Then that will help you improve your confidence. Now, that's in general, but if and just to talk a little bit more about the role play, and in preparation for the role play, I think you can feel confident that all of the scenarios that are there in the role plays, in OET role plays, are scenarios that you're going to be comfortable with, and so it's perhaps even a good idea to practice some of those speaking generally on those scenarios. So I think those are the two tips that I'm going to give you. I'm also going to put up here in the put in the chat here our speaking page, which you will find on our website oet.com. On the speaking page, you've got lots of resources. You've got videos. You've got our ultimate guides that are going to help you really get into all of the criteria that are there in speaking and that you can actually focus on to help you improve. All right. I've got a question here from Sanya who joins us on YouTube. Sanya is asking, are connectives like but, because, as well as still acceptable? Sanya, yes, those are all words that are used in writing. You can use in writing. There is there I think your question suggests that perhaps there's been some information floating around that those words are not acceptable anymore. So that is not true at all. I think those could be some rumors floating out there. I'm just going to post in the chat a really one of our most popular blog articles, and it's to do with connectors. And there you'll find more information on connectors, as well as perhaps some connectors that you might not find in OET writing, and that's because they're generally the genre of the letter, the kind of letter you're writing is a factual clinical letter which is written in a healthcare environment, and connectors, some kinds of connectors don't really suit that environment. So, for example, outdated ones like thus or hence. The blog article I've just posted in the chat has plenty of examples on of sentences, as well as some great tips on connectors. All right. Okay, I'm just going to see if I can see some different questions. And perhaps quickly just bring up from Roshika on YouTube this question again, which was answered a little bit earlier, Roshika, but talking about the single subtest attempts, perhaps. And as I said earlier, it's not something that OET controls. You can absolutely write a single subtest, or you can book a single subtest and write a single subtest, but it actually depends on your regulator that you're applying to whether they're going to accept a single subtest scores. So check with your regulator if they're going to accept that. All right. Okay, I've got a question here from Becky, and Becky joins us on YouTube. Now, Becky's question is the test going to be made tougher this year? And maybe many people say it's getting harder and it's worrisome. I think if I were you, Becky, I would be equally concerned if I heard something like that. But let me reassure you that there is absolutely no changes planned for the test in the near future. It's sometimes what happens is there's a lot of rumors around updates and around the test getting harder that are, again, like I said, circulating on social media. But these are, let me just reassure you, rumors. If you would like to, stay updated with OET and what we are doing, so events that we have and other kinds of updates, I would encourage you to go to oet.com and create a profile there. and once you're subscribed there, what happens is you'll get regular updates from us, so that you know that you know what the information is coming directly from us. So if there's no information from us about test changing or it being made tougher, then you can rest assured that that is not then that obviously means that all of those other things are rumors. So nothing planned, and I'd encourage you to create your profile on oet.com. I've got a question from Mohammed on YouTube, and the question's about speaking. So, when in the card it's mentioned you have just examined the patient, is there any need to introduce yourself? So, no, you don't need to introduce yourself. One way to think about this is to think about how you would do it in real life. Now, imagine you've just examined a patient's foot. The patients come in, you've examined their foot. And you need to continue to talk to them. You wouldn't introduce yourself in real life at that stage. And it's the same with OET. Just think about the situation. Imagine what you would do in real life, and the same thing is same thing works for OET. So you don't need to introduce yourself. What you can do is say something like, "Thank you for letting me examine you," and then you can move on to the task. Okay, I've got a question here from Dania on YouTube. Dania is asking, how can we write medicine names in reading part A? Should it be in capital letters? So, like I said, with reading part A, all you need to do is copy the word exactly as it appears in the text into your answer. And so that means if it's in capitals, if it starts with the capital, copy it exactly as it is. If it's in small letters, copy it exactly as it is. You don't need to worry about capitalization in reading part A. All right, I've got a lovely comment from Kokusumi on Facebook. Says that they cleared their listening subtest with our tips and tricks, and listening week was really helpful to improve skills. And that just reminds me that I am just going to be posting in the listening week videos that I mentioned earlier. And like I said, those are really good resources. So, what I'm going to do is encourage all of you to have a look at the Listening Week playlist, and just posting that in the chat there. So thank you for sharing that excellent news with us, and really happy to hear that the videos helped. Okay, I'm just moving down to some newer questions. Okay. So I've got a question here from George on YouTube. And George saying, is there a bank account that we can transfer the fees of the test to? We're facing many difficulties in Egypt to pay by Visa. So George, what I'd encourage you to do is to contact our customer care team, and they are available via live chat on our page, which is on our website, which is oet.com. So if you go to the website, you will see a blue chat with an expert button, and I would encourage you to contact them with your question. So go to oet.com. I've just posted there in the chat, and click the chat with an expert button to get in touch with them. All right. So looking at some questions coming in. I've got a question here from Muntasir on YouTube, and Muntasir saying, during speaking, they make some grammar mistakes, sometimes stammering, and for that reason, will OET cut my marks? So, Muntasir, when you're looking at the speaking subtest and how the assessors score you, your two role plays, they're actually looking at a whole lot of skills. They're not just looking at grammar or your or the way you're pronouncing words or your fluency. They're looking at a lot more. So there are two sets of criteria. One is your linguistic criteria. So your linguistic criteria is really all about your intelligibility, your pronunciation, your fluency, how appropriately you use language, and your grammar and expression. So grammar is just one bit of one criteria, which is resources of grammar and expression. I think what you're talking about, the stammering, for example, maybe searching for words, is your fluency. Now that's one set of criteria, but there is a second set of criteria, which is your clinical communication criteria, and that set of criteria is actually looking at how you talk to your patient, how you build a rapport with your patient, how you ask questions, how you empathize with the patient and how you listen to them, so things like that. So those are definitely much sort of broader than just grammar and just fluency. And what the assessors are doing is listening to your role plays and assessing you on all of these different aspects. So it's not the end of the world if you aren't so good perhaps in one area. What you should try and do is to look at all the criteria and identify, as you've done, where your sort of what you need to work on, um, and work on that definitely. But also, I think recognize the areas of your strength, and that will give you the confidence that you need to approach the test as well. So. What I am going to do is post in the chat here a link to our speaking page, which I just did earlier, but I'm just going to post it again. And what you can do is, Muntasir, have a look there at the uh, linguistic and clinical communication criteria, the marking aspect there, and view those criteria, and really understand what the assessors are looking for. Okay, I've got quite a few questions on part A, and I've got a question here from Shruti, who's asking why part A is so difficult nowadays. So, Shruti, like I said earlier, part A is challenging, especially because of the time limit and the pressure that you have in that situation. But that's very much a skill that you'll need when you go to the workplace. You're going to have to look for information very quickly, to care for a patient in front of you, for example, or to complete a task at work. Now, that is the context of part A, and so the reason why it is difficult is because of that challenge, and it's not just for the sake of making it difficult. The second part of your question is about nowadays, and I think that is perhaps again an idea that you might have been listening to from your friends or from social media, different channels there, uh, about the fact that about reading part A being more difficult nowadays. But It is not the test has not changed. Let me reassure you, the test, the difficulty level or the challenge of the test is very much the same. um, Perhaps what I can do is explain it a bit more and say that for each test sitting, a new paper is written with new items. So what happens is that there's the grade for that particular test, the grade boundary, so the passing score changes based on the level of challenge of that test. So what in effect that means is that if you're writing the test this Saturday, for example, and you find that it is difficult, there is that's not going to impact your score because that is already accounted for in the grade boundary or the passing score for that test. Because, like I said, the grade boundaries are adjusted and according to the challenge of the test. And what that means is that no matter when you write the test, whether it was last month, whether it's 6 months from now, a year from now, the you're going to have the same opportunity to prove your language. It's not going to be changing, and it's certainly not become more difficult. So, right. Just looking for more questions. Again, a question here from Priya on YouTube. And Priya's asking or saying that the writing tasks nowadays are to known cases. Um, that is, the the healthcare professional is already familiar with the patient. And how do you write this letter? Because the letter seems very small. So, like I said earlier, if you are finding that you've not got enough information there to write the letter, um, I think it's worth checking if the task that you're using is an official OET task. And what I'm going to do is post in the chat a link to the writing page, the sample tests, where you can have a look at the sample tests there, um, and try those out, because you will always find that there is enough information to write a full letter. If it's an official task, there will be enough information. If it's an unofficial task, sometimes you will find things like what you are describing. And the other thing is, if you are very confident that it's an official task or you've got it from the website, from an official practice book, and you still find you don't have enough relevant information, then perhaps it's a good idea to look at the task again, look at the writing task and identify the purpose for writing. The purpose for writing will tell you what you need to include in the letter. And so once you've done that, that should help you choose and select the relevant information. So I'd say go back to the purpose. If it's an official task, go back to the purpose of the letter, find the purpose, and that should help. If it's an unofficial task, then obviously, stop using it. Look for official tasks, and practice with those. All right. So I've got some more questions. I'm going to keep going, and look for some newer questions. I've got a question from Jane. Perhaps that was part of another question, but this is the second part. So Jane on YouTube says, "Is it advisable to say I'm writing to refer the above named patient?" I think Jane, the simple answer to that is just to use the patient's name. That is polite, um, and just use their name. It will be given to you in the case notes. Okay. Just looking again for some newer questions. Okay, I've got a question here from Shruti on YouTube, again about writing. And it says that if a reader is a respiratory specialist, like for example, Dr. John, is it a GP or some other doctor? Well, if it's written there that it is a respiratory specialist, then that is what they are. It's a specialist. It wouldn't be their regular doctor or their general practitioner. And this kind of information is made really quite clear in the writing task and in the case notes of all official tasks. Um, all right. What I've got a question here from Alex Meck on YouTube, and Alex is saying that they're practicing writing on a daily basis, but they have a shortage of case notes and their letter. So I think, like I mentioned earlier, with reading, if you're practicing every day with the writing task, with the test, you might find that the progress that you make is limited because you're essentially practicing or putting to test a skill. It's a good idea to practice skills. So every day, you look at the skills that you need to work on, and reserve your practice tests for uh, just periods in time where you want to test how you've improved on the skills. Now we've got a great resource, and in fact, if you go to our writing page, you'll find lots of resources, and I'm going to do that. I'm just going to post in the chat our writing page. But and specifically on that page is the writing guide, which is called the Ultimate Guide to OET Writing. Now, in that guide, you've got a breakdown of all the criteria, and plenty of examples, and lots of tips in there of how you can improve your writing. And those tips and those examples are taken from practice tests, but they look at how you can develop your skills, and that is an excellent way to start your preparation for writing. Okay, all right. Um, I can see some questions. One again from Dania. I think I answered earlier about the medicine names in listening part A. Should it begin with the capital letter? Dania, you all you need to do is write the word that you hear, and you don't need to worry about capitalization. Okay, again, Mohammed on YouTube asking, is there a difference in the difficulty levels of a test that's at the beginning or the middle or the end of the month. Absolutely not. There is no difference in the level of challenge. Like I said earlier, every candidate has the opportunity to demonstrate that to demonstrate their English language skills, because OET has had to prove to the regulators that accept our scores that the test, that any candidate who sits the test on any day, that their score is an accurate representation of their language. And so the test goes through lots of checks and lots of processes to ensure that that it is fair for everyone sitting the test at any time. And so there is no, it's not that one uh, the first of the month, the first test of the month is more difficult than the other. All right. Okay, I've got a question from Neele, and Neele is asking, could you please explain clubbing? Sure. Clubbing is a term that's often used to refer to scores from two different test sittings, combining those scores to make a score, to present a score that is acceptable to a regulator. Now, again, OET doesn't decide if clubbing is allowed or not. You need to approach your regulator, go to their website. So, for example, if it's the NMC in the UK, you need to go visit their website and look at the rules around clubbing there, so that you know whether your two test scores are acceptable for that provision, for those provisions. I've got a question here from Burhan on YouTube, and Burhan's asking, are there any shortcuts for highlighting words in the computer-based test? So all your keyboard shortcuts are disabled in the computer-based test. So no, there is no shortcut. All right. I've got a question here from Shazaib on Facebook, and Shazaib is asking, can you use the dot after salutations like doctor? So doctor dot James, or is it doctor without the dot James? Which is better? So it's not whether one is better or not. You can use either, but what I'd encourage you to do is to use one consistently. So if you've got the name appearing two times, for example, make sure that you use the name, the dot consistently. It just shows your awareness of that kind of mark, punctuation mark used there. Okay. Just looking at the last few questions. And I've got some here. Um, I think I've got a question here that I can answer quite quickly with a resource, again from Shruti. So this is probably about the writing. From where do they count the words? So the body of your letter, which excludes the address and the salutations, that is what is counted for. That is what is considered for, I guess that's the body of your letter. Now the assessors don't count your words. They don't have the time to sit there and count every single word. What they're looking for actually, and what they're counting, is information. So if you've included all of the information there in your letter that's relevant for the reader to continue care, that's what they will be looking for. If you haven't, or if you've included too much, then that's when your score would be impacted in the criterion. So, including all of the information is assessed under the content criterion. Have a look at the writing guide that I've just posted in the chat. That will give you more information, but including too much information and not, perhaps, perhaps not leaving out information is in your conciseness and clarity criterion. So that's really well explained in the writing guide. Got a question from Naresh. Can we cross out the answer to replace another one in listening part A? Yes, you can. You can cross out your answers. Make sure, though, that you do it legibly and clearly, so that the assessors who are marking your answer have no, are not confused, and they can see your answer really very clearly. Right. Um, okay, so last couple of questions I'm looking at. Okay, I've got a question from Hyacinth. If I underline some of the text in the reading subtest, just to highlight the word that I think I need to be able to answer the question. Yes, you can absolutely do that. You can highlight words, you can underline, you can circle words in the text in the paper-based test. That's looks like that's what you are referring to. You can absolutely do that. Right. Got one from Simin on the paper-based test in the writing subtest. Is there any space provided to make a draft at first? Yes, you can make notes on the case notes as well after your reading time is over, and you also have your answer booklet. So, what I would recommend is if you go to our sample tests and download those. You'll be able to also download the answer booklet, which where you'll be able to see that there is space for rough drafts. And I'm just going to post the link to the sample test. So have a look at the website, and each subtest or each sample test has an answer booklet at the end for you to look at how that appears. Okay, so I'm going to answer this one. This is from Ritika. How to recognize whether the letter to someone is a known or an unknown case. Now, the term known or unknown case, it's something that that's often used by candidates, which is basically which is a way of saying, does the reader of the letter that I'm writing to know this patient? Or is it a patient that they're familiar with? They have an existing relationship with. So, for example, if it is their regular doctor, they've been seeing for years, and that is an existing relationship. An example of someone the reader would not have an existing the patient would not have an existing relationship with is, for example, maybe a specialist who they need to see for a referral. Now, in official case notes, this will always be made clear. What we would advise is not to look at the title of the reader. So, not to look at the title and say, "Oh, okay, it's their GP." so therefore it must be a known case. No, it's actually it's made very clear in the case notes, in the information provided in the case notes, in the writing task, as well as in the last section of the case notes. You'll get a clear idea of whether the patient and the reader have an existing relationship. And I'm going to post in the chat a really popular blog article, which is explains this really quite well with lots of examples. So I'd encourage you to visit that blog page and have a look at the examples there. That will help. All right. I think we've come to the end of the hour. It's been lovely reading all of your questions. And if I haven't got to answering one of your questions, don't worry, there is still opportunity for you to be able to ask us those questions. If you use Facebook, you can go to the messenger or the chat of Facebook and type in your question there. The education team will get back to you in 24 hours with the answer. If you've got questions about your test booking, candidate number, and all of that kind of thing, the link to the website, the oet.com website, with the chat with an expert button, that's a great place to post those questions as well. The next live stream will be hosted by my colleague Rebecca, and that's on the 7th of February. So if you're subscribed to our channel, or if you've liked us on Facebook, you will get notification of that event. So I encourage you to do that if you haven't already, so that you can keep in touch with all of our live events. So until next time, thank you. Bye for now.